Hey everyone, welcome to this afternoon session. I'm thankful for SEB 10X for organizing this event, and thanks to Jeffrey, who's the co-founder and growth lead at Axie Infinity, for joining us this afternoon. I'm Kenrick. I'm the founding partner at Lunex Ventures, an early stage crypto and blockchain VC I founded in 2018, and more recently founder of the Play Future Fund, which is a new crypto and blockchain gaming fund that we're about to launch probably next month. That's enough about me. Very excited to speak to Jeff. Axie Infinity is probably the flagship example of successful crypto games at the moment, so super excited to learn from him. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us. Maybe you can start off with a quick introduction about yourself and Axie. And I'm particularly interested to hear if you had this play to earn mechanic in mind from the start, or that it's something that emerged through the game.
Hey, thanks for the invite. It's awesome to be here. So I'm Jeff, or Jiho, co-founder of Sky Mavis. We're the inventors, the creators of Axie Infinity. Yeah, I've always been a gamer and a collector. So we started working on Axie in 2018. The base principle is to introduce the world to something that's new, exciting, but a little bit scary through something that's fun, relatable, and a little bit nostalgic. So Axie is a fantasy pet battling and collecting game, but we've used blockchain to infuse it with full economic freedom and property rights for our players, as well as this kind of player-owned economy. So the Axies, the pets themselves, are NFTs, which can be traded on our in-house marketplace. All in-game resources are also ERC20 tokens that can be sold on exchanges from Binance to Uniswap. So to your question regarding whether play to earn is something that we had our minds on from the beginning, it is a bit. I think one of our first principles is that gamers are important. The attention of gamers is really important, and there's actually a monetary value to it. And that it makes sense for people to be able to turn their time and effort in the digital economies that they are a part of into real value. A lot of us were members of the CryptoKitty community and kind of had a light bulb moment when we were part of that community, and we decided that we wanted to work on the future of NFT games. I joined actually as a community member. I wasn't always a co-founder. I joined as a community member super early on in the project. I kind of just increased my involvement over time.
Nice. And yeah, I think as a result of this whole play to earn mechanic, we're now starting to see kind of the emergence of scholarships and yield guilds. Is that something you saw coming, or is that really kind of a community bottom-up led effort that kind of naturally emerged from the game?
I think it was quite organic. It was only until economic activity in the economy had grown to a certain point that we really started to see that behavior. We predicted that it might be a thing. I actually had an aha moment when I was playing Animal Crossing during the COVID pandemic. I was like, hey, people are actually gonna pay others to play Axie for them eventually once the resources hit a certain level of value. So I had that moment. I kind of told the community members about it. We started to see a little bit I told my wife, for example, hey, you should play my Axie account, while I'm working, it can be a fun, so I had that idea that people are going to just tell their friends and family to try it out. Once there's this certain level of economic impact that it could have on someone's life. But yeah, I would say that it was quite organic. We didn't really predict when it would happen, whether it would actually happen. It really, the first scholarship program was just launched by a community member named AK without any consultations with us. So.
Very cool. I think I see something similar to what you're saying. I think the growth for you guys really took off is when you moved from kind of Ethereum mainnet onto your Ronin sidechain wallet, or Ronin sidechain, basically, right? What were the considerations there for you whether you stay Ethereum, whether you build your own sidechain, which is what you did, or why not use something like Polygon or Phantom, which the previous speaker was. What made you decide to do your own, and what are the benefits of that? Or even versus, like, could you do this purely as a centralized database where you keep records of them and you just have an anchor into Ethereum? Like, how did you guys look at that?
Sure. So I think I'll talk you through our journey and how that affected our thought process. So we've been working on Axie since 2018. Originally, we even wanted every battle to be recorded on chain, where if you wanted to send your Axies to battle, you would send a transaction, right? But then we realized that, you know, the users didn't like it. Users didn't care about that. There are certain things that the users want to be on chain. There are certain things that the users want to just be smooth, right? So obviously the player-owned economy, right? Being able to sell your game asset to anyone, anywhere. This is really important. Decentralizing the ownership of the game through a governance token. This is something that the community really loves. In terms of the data storage, like they don't. It's like having full decentralization and really expensive fees. That's kind of not a trade-off that most users want to make. So yeah, you know, Axie, we were doing okay on Ethereum, right? Like we were growing and building a really strong community. I think that was really important during, you know, the 2 years of kind of bear market building. We built a really solid community on Ethereum mainnet. But yeah, you know, we also experimented with some early sidechain technologies like Loom Network, right? Like Georgios, who's now at Paradigm, was working on Loom Networks. We're like, oh, this is awesome. Like Georgios is like a foremost like layer 2 thought leader. let's check this out. But ended up, right, like Loom Network, right, like most of their founders like ended up leaving the project, and the people who chose to build on it ended up kind of in a bad situation. So I think that was one of our like realizations that, right, like it can be really dangerous to try and trust another team other than yourself when it comes to choosing a scaling solution. So yeah, that's kind of, so we had that experience, right? We talked to our users a lot, and we came to the realization that we should try and create our own sidechain. It's called Ronin. So I think in order to kind of set yourself apart in a very competitive space, you need to be a little bit contrarian. I think you need to do things a little bit differently. So I think one of the things that we've done is that we've been a little bit contrarian, and that we've kind of gone for this vertically integrated NFT game ecosystem, right? Where we have our own sidechain, we have our own wallet, and then we also have our own game, our own NFT marketplace, right? And one of our principles is that blockchain should be beautiful. And right, like sometimes the composability of, okay, like using like, you know, other products, relying on other people's works, it can basically make for a less beautiful experience. I think like one of the awesome parts about having all this infrastructure that anyone can use, right, like MetaMask, et cetera, is that, right, it really lowers the cost and time to initial deployment. So you can experiment and start building a community early. But once you gather enough engineers and resources, or at least once we gathered enough resources and engineers, we saw an opportunity to really make a smooth, consolidated experience.
And is the reason then that you use the Ronin kind of sidechain, does that give you, is that something the users get more trust from versus you just basically record keeping in your internal database? Is that something that came from your own philosophy, or was that user provided feedback, hey, we want the actual trust to be on some form of blockchain?
Yeah, I think over time, as Ronin starts to store billions of dollars, the trust and the, right, like basically the level of decentralization necessary may increase. So we want it, right? So like, I think in its current format, right, like we can add validators over time. We can upgrade the consensus mechanism. We could have validators start posting Merkle proofs to mainnet. But like these things are still being experimented on, right? Like we're not going to do R&D. Like thankfully there are other people in the EVM compatible ecosystem that are doing R&D, right? So that's also, you mentioned like, okay, why are you EVM compatible? Well, EVM compatibility is super important because all innovation that happens on EVM compatible chains can be ported and copied to other EVM compatible networks. So that's been really important, right? We're going to have a DEX. We don't have to code that ourselves, right? Like we can just get it from GitHub. So yeah, I think that's like I think that's why the EVM is such a powerful innovation engine.
Very cool. Yeah, I think one of the most impressive things about Axie is that we always say like how difficult it is to use crypto, right? In general, just sending transactions and opening wallets, and I'd say like Axie has a lot of friction for onboarding. You need Ethereum, you need MetaMask, you need a Ronin wallet, you need to purchase Axies for a few $100s. You need to then somehow sideload an application on your phone or on Windows just to do that. So because of that, like the 500,000 plus DAU is even more impressive. Anything there on kind of the willingness for people to go through this onboarding, and do you see that becoming easier in the future? And if so how? With what tools or solutions are available for that?
Yeah, if dApps are actually life-changing and bringing economic freedom to people and huge benefits, people will go through a lot of steps. Obviously, I don't want to say, obviously we need to make things easier. We need to make things more accessible. But there are people who don't know how to use any type of application. They don't know how to use Facebook Messenger. In Korea, they don't know how to, grandparents don't know how to use Kakao, yet they all use it. Why? Because the benefits are huge. So if we need to focus on like, what are the core benefits that we're offering? Right? Are we actually building something that's life-changing? If it is life-changing, then people are going to find out a way to use it. That should be like the core base, right? Like, yeah, lowering the onboarding friction, that's something that just happens as you get more resources and more people thinking about it. But yeah, I don't think like you can't just make an app super easy to use and then people are going to use it, right? Like it has to be something that has inherent value and something that improves the lives of people. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So one thing that I'm personally also very interested in, having done kind of user acquisition and growth for games, is like how you do this in an Axie or a crypto kind of world, right? So in traditional free-to-play gaming, I think it's been pretty well established how user acquisition works in terms of your LTV needs to be bigger than your CAC, and that's you get your users through traditional advertising mostly. With some virality built in, like those are kind of the levers to play with in traditional free-to-play gaming. But I could imagine that in a game like this, you're starting to look at very different types of metrics, right? So do you still consider like the traditional retention, average revenue per daily active users, lifetime value, or are there also more crypto native metrics that you think are more useful for these types of games? So I don't know, number of active wallets that integrate with or that interact with the game on a daily basis, or the number of transactions that happen on a daily basis. Like, what are some of the metrics that you've looked at in the past, and maybe how are they evolving over time?
Yeah, definitely. I think right now, right, like free-to-play mobile games, it's about, okay, looking at the metrics and then running like live ops to, right, like increase like average revenue per user, right? It's like, oh, if I do this, run this promotion, right? Like I see this spike among these cohorts, right? Or retention increases, right? For us, so far, the data is just a symptom of our success, right? Like we look at the data and be like, okay, like we're doing well, things are growing. Okay, like we're at product market fit, right? It's more like our growth strategy is a lot different. Why do game developers primarily look at these types of data, right? Well, they're looking at like demographic groups. They're doing like very specific user targeting through Instagram and Facebook ads, things like that. They're doing paid UA. We don't do any paid UA, right? We're cutting out the middlemen of, right, like platform marketing and going directly to and basically using micro influencers and influencers, right? And the thing about Axie is that everyone in the network, their incentives are aligned. Like part of playing Axie is this overall larger PvE metagame where everyone is incentivized to increase and grow the game. So part of playing Axie, yes, it might be like battling the pets, but the other part is everyone working together to make Axie as large as possible. And so you see a lot of community members who may not have been content creators or YouTubers or Twitch streamers In the past, they're like, okay, like I need to do my part for the Axie Nation. I need to start making content so that more people find out about Axie. So Axie is now the number 81st most streamed game on Twitch. So it's in the top, it's well in the top 100. And most of our streamers have never been streamers before Axie. Axie was their first game that they've ever streamed, and they just started out as players and then they became influencers. So players becoming influencers because they love your game so much and want it to spread, and that there's like economic alignment. That's actually the future of growth for at least like player-owned economies. So yeah, I don't know if I'm sharing too much, but I think like that's what we've seen to be successful, and that's why it's really organic. And yeah, we don't do paid UA, right? Like it's kind of like an extractive relationship that, right? Like I don't know, it could be like in the future, right? When we need to really increase top of the funnel and our product is super usable by mainstream users who aren't really interested in blockchain or but yeah, for now, I think like organic growth is the way to go. 55% of our users, they find out about Axie through friends and family. So actually the thing that we try and do is make sure that Axie is something that people would want to tell their friends and family about. That's what we do from the product side. It's like, will our crypto native users onboard by hand their friends and family? Like that's the thing that we need to build towards. And then when they're talking about Axie, how do they talk about Axie? Do they have the right material and content to show other people? Do they know that Axie is a movement or a revolution, not just a game? Do they know the significance of what we're building? So I think it's like a kind of a different approach. I've never done like, UA for traditional gaming. I have a background in, I've worked on political campaigns before. So I actually find it a lot more similar to that, right? It's like starting a movement, getting your message out there, working with micro influencers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. The crypto incentives here actually align the interest. I can attest to that. I posted one thing on Twitter about Axie, and I immediately got DMs of people asking for scholarships. So I think there's a large viral factor there to the game. I'd say so. Where does this go in the future? Right? Like some of the critics would argue at the moment, like. It's mainly driven by the increasing price of AXS or SLP, and people are only playing it for the money they can make now, and maybe at some point the prices of those tokens go down, or kind of the market is saturated. The users are not playing it for the entertainment; they're playing it to make the money. What would you say to kind of those users, and how do you see kind of a balanced economy, but then a much larger one kind of at a more mature stage for the game?
It makes sense. I mean, I think part of what's really special is that you have the combination of work and play, right? It's like a passion economy where people are having fun, but they're also seeing it as work, right? This is a new type of job. It's a new type of work. It's like the creation of, right, the gig economy. Like people would never have thought that, 10 years ago, they would never have thought that driving Ubers and renting out your Airbnb would be like a huge industry. So it's just the introduction of a new type of work. So people have a lot of like skepticism around it, but I think that's good. I think right now, over time, like it makes it much easier, right? If we can make the game more fun and have people spending, within our economy for fun and status. There is already like a fair amount of that kind of spending within our ecosystem, but yeah, scaling that over time, will make things easier from economic balance standpoint. Right now, Axie is a growth dependent emerging market economy. It is dependent on growth, just like any startup, just like any growing nation. It's kind of fueled by growth from immigration. But over time, we will start to harness the network effect of our player base, right? And then you start bringing in exogenous pools of capital that aren't, right, just like looking to, spend to play to earn or something like that, right? For example, you will have DeFi protocols start offering liquidity incentives, for example, for people who own the in-game resources. Why? Because that's a way to get distribution for your token, right? So if you can eventually, I think like most network effect based products, right? They start off like, okay, they grow a lot, and then eventually once they aggregate enough users, you go into distribution. I think a lot of products are going to be super interested in, kind of introducing their DeFi protocols, et cetera, to the Axie community. And there's a lot of value to be captured by the overall economy through that mechanism.
Yeah, what is your larger kind of vision here for the project then? So right now, obviously, it's a battle game, but there's also land, and like what do you want the game to be, the growing ecosystem to be, basically?
Sure. So I think that Axie isn't just one game, it's an entire universe of potential games. You can think of it as a protocol for the development of internet monster games. Over time, it will be impossible for Sky Mavis to create enough content to satisfy hundreds of millions of players. So we will have to, in a way, right, decentralize the development of the game. You even see this in the conventional world with something like Roblox, where they're using a user-generated content to basically create a free market for content within their ecosystem, right? So in the future, we will have an SDK, right? Anyone, anywhere should be able to build an Axie game that potentially adds value to the ecosystem. I believe that Axie, the next social network, will be a game. It's not going to look like the social networks of today. So once you aggregate hundreds of millions of users all within this kind of game universe, there's so many opportunities, right? Like I think 25% of Axie players, they don't have a bank account, right? So there's a huge opportunity for us to go into financial services and accrue value for us as well as the community through that. I think like Ronin can become a distribution platform for other games and other game developers that are looking to get into the tech. I try not to talk too much about that. Why? Because everyone promises that when they have some type of new scaling solution. Our approach is just to aggregate users, show our love to our users, make sure that they're really happy and that we're growing. I think like that basically user-focused mentality is kind of one of, at the bread and butter of what we do. I think there's also potential for Ronin to become a type of platform for high quality NFT games.
Yeah, makes sense. I think I definitely share that vision that you have. Next social network being a game. So more practical kind of things for the here and now that I was wondering about. So like you had some scaling issues over the past couple of weeks, right? In terms of server issues. Is this related because we're really talking about a new type of game with new tech, with your own sidechain wallet? Is this related to the blockchain side of things, or is it just because the user growth was so explosive you hadn't foreseen that and it's difficult to scale? What kind of caused this, or what are the lessons you could learn from that?
Yeah, definitely. So the issue was on the game. It was on the game server related to like the database where the battle logic was stored. It worked when we had 200,000 users, 300,000 users. Once we hit 500,000 users, things started getting tangled. So it's we need to separate that out into different services. I think we're not the first game to experience scaling or server issues, right? I think it's quite common, especially games that are growing 40% week on week. That said, obviously, we're taking the situation really seriously, and we have our best engineers on it. I think it's a good sign. It's a good problem to have, but it causes a lot of pain for users. It's definitely something that we're taking really seriously.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can blame an early stage game that's free and where you can make money for the servers being down once in a while. So I think that's quite.
One thing that I also want to say is that relative to our DAU, our number of concurrents is abnormally high, right? Because the average session time is so high. It's like, approaching 3 hours. So it's like the concurrence is just huge. And it's basically, right, like, I don't know, the level of, right, like server activity that you'd expect from a game with many more users, actually.
Yeah, I think if I'm not wrong, for the audience, the average session time for another casual game is like what, 10, 15 minutes or so. So that's 3 hours is quite the metric there. Awesome, sounds great. Yeah, one other thing I was wondering about, and I guess this question applies to DeFi, blockchain, and crypto overall, but how do you think at some point when this becomes even bigger, even wider spread, will there be pushback from regulators, because we're talking about assets and people making money? Are you guys thinking about that? Are you trying to mitigate that? Like, do you see it as a risk or not? Like, how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I think that the key to regulation is adoption. It's up to the constituents to right in free societies, the platforms, the nation state, they have to bend to the will of the voters. So one of the problems with blockchain regulation is that we don't have enough adoption. We need the constituents to demand from their elected officials that they allow for experimentation and economic freedom to flourish and entrepreneurship to progress. So you see already in Korea, right, where a large portion of the population owns and trades cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of pressure on government officials to be at least seen as pro-crypto. That's kind of like a trend in this upcoming election cycle here in Korea. I'm not Korean, but this is what I'm observing from living here, is that, now politicians are all like bragging about how much they lost on the recent dip, trying to show that they're men or women of the people. So I think that basically adoption solves regulation in the long run. So we just need to focus on adoption. And then, maybe I think that there are people who love freedom within the governments of the world that will understand what we're doing here.
Absolutely. Fully agree with that. How do you see the overall kind of metaverse and NFT gaming ecosystem develop? Have you, I'm sure you've been approached by, like some of the larger AAA studios already, and like, hey guys, what are you doing? You want to collaborate? What's your kind of feel of how, let's say on one hand, we have crypto native gaming, let's call it, like Axie Infinity, on the other hand, we have kind of traditional gaming. How do you think those two will, I think they will eventually merge into just gaming. But how long do you think that is? And what do you think will happen before that?
Yeah, I mean, do you remember when Nintendo tried to make a mobile game, like the Mario game or whatever? It's just the incumbents, they just typically, right, they may invest and get exposure to these new paradigms and new models. I think they're most interested in maybe just investing, learning about it, right, just getting exposure through acquisition or basically investment, rather than actively running experiments. Maybe I think they will also run some experiments. They'll be kind of pretty lightweight as well. So yeah, there is a lot of inbound, I guess, but it's unclear, right? I don't think most of the incumbents are interested in totally revamping their business models quite yet. They want to see it more proven. But I think that a lot of traditional game developers I've heard are super excited about what we're doing at Axie. So yeah, I give them some credit to noticing what's happening here. I think we will see some experiments, perhaps just quick runs of NFTs on another platform, right? So you might see some lightweight integrations versus experiments. That's what I would look for first, and see how those go.
Yeah. Awesome. I think our time is up. Thanks very much, Jeff. This has been super, super helpful. And all the best with Axie. We'll keep playing and hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much, Kenrick, and everyone who invited me. It's been really fun to chat with you all today.
Thanks.